Hi class, my name is Laczynski, and this is my presentation on the article Actual and Perceived Peer Status of Learning Disabled Students in Mainstream Programs by Virginia Bruinings. The aim of this presentation is to explore the evolution of ideas in special education. So as you guys may or may not have seen, our classmate Christina researched the same article that I did, and although I 100% agree with her rationale, which is that it's essential for teachers to know the importance of LD students and their social positions in the classroom, I actually had a different rationale. As I was going through the different case studies and all of the classic special education articles, this was the one that really pulled on my heartstrings and really drew me in. Immediately upon reading the abstract of this article, I thought of a 6th grade boy that I observed for this very class. The boy I observed has Asperger's syndrome, and although he is extremely smart and he knows so many facts about so many different things, he has difficulty being social and interacting with his peers, as well as his teachers. His IEP specifically states that he needs to be more social daily. He must say, "Hi, how are you?" to his teachers, and he must try to talk to other students. If you haven't already read this article, I strongly recommend that you do. I believe that it's a good article for special education teachers to read, for general education teachers to read, all different kinds of teachers, and I also think that it's an article that parents and students should also be aware of. So since I'm not a teacher yet and I still have a little ways to go, I thought that it would be important for me to research more about mainstreaming and its history and how it affects students with learning disabilities and their social status. Before I go into the topic of mainstreaming and how it not only socially affects students with LD, but how it generally affects them, I wanted to provide you with a brief summary of the article by Virginia Bruinings. The article objective was to investigate the peer status of students with learning disabilities in regular classrooms and how these students, as well as their peers, perceive their social position within the classroom. What do you think the results were? To be honest, I felt that students with LD would be lower in peer status, and I also predicted that the students with LD would think the same way. So take a minute, pause this presentation, and think to yourself, what do you think the results were? The results. As a result, within the mainstream programs, LD students in the regular classrooms were significantly less socially accepted than their classmates. And students with LD were less accurate in assessing their own social status in the peer group. So my prediction was half correct. Do the results surprise you? Key points. Peer relationships influence social development and learning. A direct quote from the article by Bruinings. Adjustment of an individual to his peer group may be affected by how accurately he can perceive the relative status of its members, including his own status. This is very unfortunate because a student with a learning disability may think that his social status is higher than what others perceive it to be, and he or she could end up being hurt further as a result of this. If LD students don't perceive their status in the classroom, they may not see any need to change their interactions with their peers, and this can have an effect on positive relationships. How can teachers help? Teachers can provide opportunities to enhance peer relationships in the classroom. These opportunities can include small group work, role play, and get-to-know-you sessions, amongst many other ways. The article by Bruinings doesn't cover much about mainstreaming in general, so in order to look into the social status of students with LD, I looked further into mainstreaming. Prior to the 1970s decade, self-contained classrooms were the norm for children, even with mild disabilities. In the 1970s, many court cases moved the direction of public education from self-contained classrooms to more students with disabilities being placed into general education settings. In 1975, PL 94-142 was passed, otherwise known as Education for All Handicapped Children Act. This act mandated that children with special education needs will be educated in the least restrictive environment. The definition of least restrictive environment is that students with disabilities must be educated in as normal of an educational environment as deemed possible to their academic and social needs. Although not used in PL 94-142, mainstreaming became the word used to describe the primary implication that this law, Education for All Handicapped Children Act, had for K-12 schools. It was anticipated that mainstreaming would prove to be a way of providing better education for most students through better use of the school facilities and personnel. In 1990, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act was amended to become IDEA, which we all know is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. In 2004, IDEA was reauthorized, and the federal law known as IDEA now ensures that all children and youths with disabilities have the right to a free, appropriate public education. Should we mainstream? There are many pros and cons to mainstreaming. Each teacher, as well as parents of students with disabilities, have their own opinions on the subject. There are social and academic advantages, as well as social and academic disadvantages. Pros of mainstreaming. First, mainstreaming is a way for disabled students to interact with non-disabled students in a classroom setting. It's not that they won't have interaction with peers in a special education class, but this opens up to a more diverse group of peers. Although mainstreaming won't automatically help students with LD be more socially accepted, it can help to improve social skills. Most students with LD have difficulty interacting with others and being social. Though it will still be hard for them, being with a diverse group can help them open up and can boost their self-esteem. Students who are learning disabled can learn to work with students without learning disabilities, and vice versa. Learning to work together can teach compassion, acceptance, collaboration, and patience, which are all good qualities to help students with transitioning. An academic advantage is that students with LD can receive the same curriculum. Even though there will be accommodations or modifications, they will still be learning what everyone else is learning. The topic of tolerance can become a positive one for regular classroom students. If we didn't mainstream, the student population won't be exposed to students with special needs in a classroom setting. Therefore, these students won't have the chance to promote the kind of tolerance that will carry them through adulthood. And lastly, mainstreaming exposes all types of people to each other. As regular classroom students learn about tolerance, students with disabilities can learn what behaviors are acceptable and which behaviors are not acceptable. Cons of mainstreaming. It's unfortunate, but special education students are labeled by their disability. Students with LDs will constantly try to prove their individual needs and strengths and talents. A social disadvantage includes behavior issues, which can damage self-esteem. A student with an LD could have a few outbursts that can turn the other students away and can make that student feel embarrassed. Students with disabilities may feel a sense of pressure to try and belong, which can cause students to become unsure of themselves. Although being able to have the same curriculum as your peers can seem to be a pro, it's also an academic disadvantage because a student with a disability may not be able to keep up with the work, even with modifications. This can, in turn, impact the pace of the class. Tolerance is a great trait to have, but it can be hard. Many students without disabilities may feel that students with disabilities can get away with a lot because of their disability. This can lead to other students acting out. Since mainstreaming doesn't seem to be going anywhere, how can we help? Teachers can help with pro-social behaviors through such methods as modeling, shaping, coaching, and cognitive problem-solving skill development. Teachers and parents should try and change the attitudes of non-disabled students towards disabled students. For example, peer tutoring, reinforcement, role-playing, and enabling can all help with this situation. This statement brings me back to the boy that I observed, and who I thought about when I read the article by Virginia Bruinix. My friend is actually his teacher, and she told me just the other day that they were playing Jeopardy, and this boy with Asperger's answered a question correctly. She said all of the other students clapped and said, "Way to go!" as if he had never answered a question correctly before. His teacher joked, and she said, "Little do they know, but this boy with Asperger's has the top grades in the class." So just because he has Asperger's, the class assumed he wasn't smart. This goes back to the idea of a stigma on students who are learning disabled. And lastly, teachers and counselors should reach out to those students who are struggling socially. Conclusion. So now you have a summary of the article by Virginia Bruinix titled Actual and Perceived Peer Status of Learning Disabled Students in Mainstream Programs. Again, you should read it. And you have an overview of mainstreaming and its pros and cons. So, how do you feel about mainstreaming? Do you think it has a direct effect on the social status of students who are learning disabled? In my personal opinion, as a person who is still studying how to become a teacher, I'm still quite unsure. I agree that mainstreaming is a good way to have everyone interact with each other, and it can help students with disabilities improve their social skills. But then, on the other hand, for me, it seems like mainstreaming does, in fact, have an effect on the social status of these students because they don't seem to know where they belong. Mainstreaming is a topic I'm still exploring, and once I'm a teacher, I will probably develop a stronger opinion. No matter what happens, the decision on where to place a student should be what is best for that student. If a student is mainstreamed, they need to be monitored, and we need to make sure that they have all they need to be successful in the regular education setting, which I guess can be said about all of our students. We need to learn to co-teach with a special education teacher, and we need to differentiate and modify where necessary. Please share your thoughts with me. I'd love to hear everyone's opinions on mainstreaming. As I've said, I'm still very new to this so-called hot topics of education, and I'm still developing opinions as I learn more about education. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch and listen to my presentation.